The following is a presentation of the Best Station. The views and comments made in the following program do not necessarily represent the views and comments of the Best Station.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Comicasters podcast. I'm your co-host, MC Brown.
I am Colt Hudson.
And I'm Derek Ross.
And we are here in our first inaugural show to review comics, comic news, and anything and everything in the world of comics, including conventions, trades, which we're doing today, and just host a whole lot of good stuff. We're going to be reviewing the Judas contract today on the show, and we want to get your feedback as well, along with any future ideas. I want to plug our Twitter, at Comicasters, Comicasters, on Twitter. Instagram are the same, Comicasters, and Facebook.com/Comicasters, where we can all be reached for social media, feedback, questions, suggestions, anything, whatever you guys want to talk about. Please contact us on social media, and we'd love to talk about it. So, welcome, guys. You excited about today's show?
Absolutely.
Yeah, really excited. Going to get into just a brief overview here of what the Judas contract is about for those who are unaware.
I'm going to give a brief bio, so Derek, take it away.
Back in the 80s, the new Teen Titans became DC's most popular title and a huge sales success. The series reached its zenith with the Judas contract storyline, a multi-part epic that played on comic readers' expectations and offered shocking revelations and surprising twists at every turn. From the retirement of Robin and Kid Flash, to the birth of Nightwing and the introduction of Jericho, to the ultimate betrayal of a Titan, the Judas contract kept readers positively riveted during its initial run and still has fans talking today.
And the Judas contract trade, which we are reviewing, we got some great creators that worked on it. If you want to list all the names out, Derek, let's see who else has worked on this trade.
We start with the writer, Marv Wolfman, followed by the penciler, George Perez. Then the inkers are Dick Giordano, Mike DiCarlo, Romeo Tangal, George Perez again. The colorists are Adrian Roy, Anthony Tollin, and the letterers are Ben Oda, John Costanza, Todd Klein, and Bob Lepine.
And just an incredible list of talent there that's worked on this trade, the story. The new Teen Titans changed its name after the first couple issues, 39-40, went to Tales of the Teen Titans, and that, I believe, took over 41 through 44, which we're reviewing, which also encompasses the annual, which was the finale of the story, the final part 4 of the Judas contract. So we'll be reviewing that entire trade in its entirety. We're going to run down some of the major players, Colt. We're going to give a list, and the Teen Titans we're reviewing here is from 1983-84. Also, give us a little bit of time frame there, what's going on there.
Yeah, so we've got, 7 major players on the Teen Titans? So
yes,
first we're going to talk about Robin, who actually after this very series is no longer Robin. And
Correct.
I don't want to spoil that just yet for those who are unaware of what becomes. But we're pretty familiar with Robin. We know he's got a lot of background there with Batman.
This is the Dick Grayson version, correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
A lot of background there with Batman. He's been trained by virtually one of the best.
Yes.
We could argue the best, in fact. I think most people will probably be familiar with his character out of most of the Teen Titans.
And Robin leading this group. This is not the Junior Justice League. Marv Wolfman made quite sure to make us aware that he's took some of the major players from the 60s Teen Titans, but mostly these are a lot of brand new characters that him and co-creator George Perez created for this lineup here. It's also rivaled at the time Marvel's X-Men, Derek, who also had a pretty strong killer lineup with Chris Claremont. I believe John Byrne during that time in the 80s had a crazy lineup. And this was DC's own juggernaut. So this was a strong time for the team. And what we're reviewing here in this story is one major storyline. And yes, one of them, Robin, Nightwing, also debuts in the story, which is Dick Grayson's other character, which we all know. And we will be getting into that later as well. Kid Flash, also another player. He does make an appearance here. we will talk about his appearance real quickly. He's Wally West, and that is also the protege of Flash. And he is also in the story along with Wonder Girl Donna Troy, raised by the Amazons, but she was not an Amazon in there. She was Wonder Girl's also protege. Those were kind of the three carryover Titans from the 60s stories.
Right.
We have Starfire, brand new character, and that's Corey Andar. She's from the Tamaran, is her home planet, and she was abducted as a slave and brought in by I believe it was the Gordanians that had kidnapped her and brought her basically on a spaceship. She escaped and the Titans took her in. She's another major player, powerhouse. Changeling, which you're also familiar with.
Yeah, also important to note, now known, I would say, as Beast Boy,
Yes.
right? Who, it's important to note with him, some people think he can change into anything. In fact, it is only animals.
Yes.
Hence the name Beast Boy.
Garfield Logan.
Yes, Garfield Logan.
And only certain animals.
Yes. He could not change into a Wookiee.
Yes.
I believe he states that in the story. Raven, also in the story, the daughter of Trigon, the Terrible. And you guys have any thoughts on Trigon? Just real briefly. Just dangerous demon.
I think dangerous demon is probably an understatement.
Yes. So basically, you could see that her powers are very scary, and she's one of the major players in there because she suspects a lot about the next player in the story, the final Titan, quote unquote, Tara Markov. Do you have any thoughts on her, Derek?
Well, certainly in the beginning of the story, she does seem like she's not all there and she's not a member. Originally, Changeling talks about how he doesn't feel like he fits in, but then Tara encourages him and then later discourages him when they get into a sparring match. And she doesn't seem to fit in, and she's very snarky and very negative a lot of the time.
Her powers of control over the Earth, much like her brother Geoforce, or half-brother, I should say, who was an outsider. Very powerful Titan, and we didn't really get too many of the powers per se. Wonder Girl's obviously an Amazon. Starfire can shoot bolts from her hands, very powerful. Changeling, obviously, we covered his powers. Raven is an empath. She's kind of a pacifist, so she tries to stay out of that, but she can also heal the Titans when they're injured by encompassing them in her soul self.
Right.
And we can't omit Cyborg Victor Stone, who's also currently he's a member of the Justice League, but if you want to tell us a little bit about him.
I mean, I was going to leave it on you because I know he is one of your favorites.
Yes, Victor Stone, half man, half machine. I love Cyborg's look in this. He's kind of, I grew up with him, watching him. He was also part of the Superpowers cartoon. He was kind of a troubled youth. He wanted to just be a man and fit in, but due to accident at Star Labs created him. His father was a scientist, actually grafted parts of cybernetic parts to him to save his life, but also made him a powerhouse. Basically, Cyborg, one of my favorites, super strong, has his white noise sound blaster, just a very, very, at times could be considered a kind of stereotypical angry black character, but Cyborg just very, very powerful and one of my favorites. He just basically, I think, just a product of the times. Nothing disparaging. I think he just had a chip on his shoulder, but I think that Marv wrote him really well and likable despite all of his rage in him.
You say powerhouse, and that's definitely true, especially with the art in this book. The only person who is a bulky, strong powerhouse type character is Cyborg.
Yes.
All the rest of the characters are very slender, very slim, and he's the only one that really stands out in that
And we'll
way.
get into that with George Perez's art and how he draws him. Our final character we're going to talk about, we'll have a couple lesser ones at the end, is the story centered around Deathstroke the Terminator, Slade Wilson.
Yes.
And I don't know if one of you guys want to kind of take a brief origin thing of what kind of character is this and what does he bring into the story?
Gosh, yeah. Slade Wilson, the primary antagonist here throughout the story, not to take away from Tara, but, he is really the epitome of a mercenary.
Yeah.
I mean, even to this day, he has lasted, 40, 50 years as a character, and he's still one of the baddest guys in the DC universe.
Yes.
What's so fascinating about the Judas Contract is that we get Slade Wilson's origin story.
Exactly.
And later, it's going to be important to note that the cost of this series is still pretty expensive because of who Slade Wilson is and what that origin story entails.
Deathstroke has only, rise in popularity over the years, and I know the origin, Derek, obviously struck a nerve with you as well.
Yeah.
Just, you weren't obviously too familiar with it going in, but you were really shocked at the events in this story that really kind of sunk their teeth into his origin and told it.
Right. His heartlessness and then heartfeltness later in the comic, in the beginning, seeing how much his honor meant to him, and then seeing that his son still mattered.
And we'll delve definitely into it. Deathstroke is DC's answer to Super Soldier, kind of gone bad, or mercenary, depending, anti-hero, depending on which era you've read Deathstroke. But in here where we find him, and we'll talk about this shortly, he is taking up the contract of his son, who was the Ravager, who died all the way back in New Teen Titans #2, where Deathstroke debuted. And this was a contract with an organization that we'll touch on as our final thing is the Hive. And the Hive had a contract with the Ravager, and that was to kill the Teen Titans. So basically Deathstroke has taken over this contract. He's crafted a master plan to take them out, and involves these major players. At the beginning, we find when we issue 39 is basically the storyline with Robin and Kid Flash's exit from the Titans. Issues 40 and 41 cover a battle with Brother Blood. We're not going to touch too much on that. That's in the trade, obviously, and that's a story I kind of think falls more on touching upon Tara's power and what she means to the Titans, but we're going to delve right into a plot, basically the Judas contract, which is the meat of this trade. This is what the trade is named, and it's written by Marv Wolfman, co-plotted by George Perez as well. And this was a story laid out, Colt, all the way back in New Teen Titans #26 when Tara Markov debuted.
Yeah, that was her inaugural. That's the first time we met her.
Yes.
And we didn't know what to think.
Yeah.
And then as we move into, issue 39, it becomes more clear of maybe what her purpose is.
Exactly.
I think it's crystal clear throughout. And I think we'll get there as we continue to look maybe more at the story and the plot.
She was found as a damsel kind of in distress, escaping a terrorist organization, as we'll find out. And basically in this story, this is, as we said, Deathstroke's master plan as he took over the contract from the Hive for his son, the Ravager, was to place Tara, the mole, is, so to speak, a spy in the Titans. So starting all the way back in New Teen Titans 26, this basically culminated to New Teen Titans #39, where we find both Deathstroke and Tara going over their plan, their final plot, so to speak, to bring this plan to fruition here. And this is pretty powerful stuff, because as we go into the story, this is a story of betrayal, Derek, and it's a very powerful story.
And maybe less of betrayal than pure infiltration.
Yeah.
Tara obviously never had any real connection with any of the Teen Titans, and she even expresses later on how much she hates them.
Yes.
And how much she hates what they stand for, the do-gooders that do good for everyone else when they should be taking advantage of them. And obviously, throughout the story, there are frames where she takes pictures for Deathstroke, spy pictures and all that kind of stuff, to send back to him. And so every interaction that she has with the Teen Titans is logged, and she gets that information always back to Slade Wilson.
It's a kind of a dirty feeling watching it unfold, Cole.
Right. And, it's no coincidence that it's called the Judas contract, right?
Exactly.
We were talking earlier about the name Judas, right?
Yes.
There's kind of a negative connotation to the name Judas. We don't meet a lot of people named Judas.
Explain to our listeners, Colt, just as quick as you could, what the name Judas means, and especially as it relates to the story.
Yeah, I think, anytime we think of Judas, we immediately think of betrayal.
Yes.
And I think, as Derek said, infiltration.
Yes.
Right. I think whether people are familiar with the account that we see in the Bible,
yes,
they know the story.
Yeah.
Right. We've got a guy who's hanging out with these 11 other people, and they think he's part of the team. And hey, he's on side. He's doing things with us. But wait a second. When the true time comes, his true identity comes out. Hey, I didn't care about you guys, and in fact, I never did.
Yeah.
Tara, same thing. You think I'm part of the team? Yeah, I was with you for almost 2 years. And then what happens at the end? I never belonged at all.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with you. It was crystal clear that betrayal is absolutely right, and that's what she portrays
And
here.
in the story of Judas selling out his friends and his brethren, and Jesus, as we will say, for silver coins, Tara, her motives, rely a lot on hate, I think, more than even money. Her camaraderie with Deathstroke, just the fact that, maybe she was doing it for the common enemies of the Titans, maybe because she felt, this is a way to stick it back to society, because she always had a rough upbringing, not like her brothers in Geoforce and in the country of that they came from, that all this stuff coming from Tara is from a basis of just hate and rage, and I didn't get the impression, I don't know about you guys, that it was for money, was not her driving factor. It's just like she hated these kids, these other kids that, that were doing all these good things. She infiltrated them, as you said, Derek, and Marv set it up purposely. He said that this is not a traitor story. This is a planned infiltration, as you said, a spy in their midst, purposely. She was never a nice person.
Right.
She was there to betray the Titans, in the sense of she was there to get their confidence and turn it on them in the end. And that was really, she was there purposely. Yeah, she was evil. She always was evil.
And that's crystal clear as you get to the end.
Yes.
If you're going through and you think, well, maybe there's hope she's going to stay with the Titans.
Yes.
When you get to the end, no, it's pure unadulterated evil.
Yes.
She's never been good.
Yes.
And Deathstroke even expresses that. When Wintergreen says, don't you think, aren't you worried that she might actually go with the Teen Titans? And he said, she's so far from that, that's not even a possibility. And then you look at there's another similarity to the account of Judas in the Bible, in which she kisses Logan. They have a sort of interesting moment at the end of a pier, and she kisses Logan, and later on in the story, she talks about how that sickened her, that she just wanted to puke after that, how horrible it was for her. But she was doing it, again, for that betrayal, so she could earn his trust, only to take that away, and then eventually she wanted to kill him.
It's like a kiss of death, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's real important to notice, we could bust down every beat, but we don't want to spoil all the good stuff. We're obviously reviewing the story, but we also want to leave something for you guys to read yourselves. So we could bust down everything that happens in there, but this is a very powerful story, and it doesn't end well. And it's a beautifully drawn story, and we're going to get into that, although we're going to take our first station break here. So as we go to station break, we will return and break down the art by George Perez. Who are some of your favorite characters that he drew in the story? George Perez, a legendary artist in comics. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into entertainment value, and that's the emotional impact of this story. And we're going to really get some of the major beats in there without, really telling you everything, but we're going to tell you things that really stood out to us to hopefully whet your appetite to read this yourself if you haven't, but relive it again if you want to, delve back into it and reread it. So we're going to into all that stuff. We're going to take a station break, and then we'll be right back. You're listening to thebeststation.net, home of the best station, the best music, for the best audience. Now featuring the best podcasts for the best audience. With such podcasts as The Fast Pitch, starring MC Brown and Dr. Eric Lenneberg, covering any and all related MLB news and current events. And now featuring The Comicasters, starring MC Brown, Colt Hudson, and Derek Ross. On location for comic book conventions, reviewing comic book trades and collections, and anything and all related comic book movies, news, and events. This is a presentation of thebeststation.net. The best station, the best music, for the best audience.
Would that be my spider sense returning? Who's that? He's back. Way to go. Don't let those overgrown tin men keep you down. What? Just too many of the big guys for you, buddy. What? Hold on tight.
Can Spidey handle the Sentinel's blast?
Whoa.
Grab a copy of this month's Spider-Man. Marvel Comics, it's mayhem for your mind.
And we are back here on Comicasters, and we're going to be talking about the art specifically penciler George Perez and the impact he's made on all of us reading this story and this trade of the Judas contract. I'm going to send it to Colt now. I was going to read a quote directly from George, something he was describing of one of the main characters, Tara.
Yeah, as I was researching and, doing some background on the story of the Judas contract, I came across a quote from George in regard to Tara, and he says, "I wanted her to be cute, but not beautiful. She looked like a young girl. I gave her a substantial overbite. Her eyes were wide. Her body was slim. She wasn't particularly busty. I wanted her to almost look 11. And
did he accomplish that?
I would say he did.
Yeah.
When we see her in 39, she's got a lot of makeup on. She's in a fairly intimate scene with Deathstroke,
which we'll talk about in the in her emotional impact.
Absolutely. And even Deathstroke says, "Gosh, that makeup doesn't fit you. You're a young girl. Get rid of that."
Yeah.
And then by the time we see her throughout the rest of the comics, you see, oh yeah, she almost does look different. So reading this quote from him, I feel like he nailed it.
Like she's two different people for sure. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Which of course fits the character.
Yeah. That was the whole intent, yeah.
Yeah, so I think he knocked it out of the park with that.
George, good background, just a legendary artist, obviously, for years. We're still talking about George Perez, and it's just years later. It's some odd, 30 years later from when he did this, and it's just incredible artist, legendary, and just new Teen Titans are synonymous with George Perez. And talk about now what's one of your favorite character, one of your favorite characters that George drew in the story here.
As much as I like Deathstroke, I really think George does a good job with Slade Wilson. Right, so
his alter ego, yes.
Yeah, so when you see a picture of Slade Wilson drawn by George, you see this distinguished man who is put together, and the demeanor on his face, and he's just almost callous in a way, but just the way George draws him really brings that out. There doesn't even have to be words on the page.
Yeah,
you could say, "Hey, I understand what Slade is thinking right now." And that's impressive if you can do that as an artist.
Oh, yeah. The emotional just draws you into what they could be thinking in that moment.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, I have to agree.
And probably one of my favorites, definitely my favorite, would be Jericho, Deathstroke's son.
Visually, right? Just a striking individual.
And I think the reason behind that is based on Jericho's power, which is to, I guess, take over someone's body with his own. First, he has to make that eye contact, and then they're in that comic, he actually has the word contact go through his mind, and his eyes just glow green.
And we kind of failed to touch on it. He's a pretty important character, I think we do have to say. Jericho is Deathstroke's son in the story. He's a pretty integral part to the success of the Titans to get out of this predicament that his father has put them in, for sure. So I don't think we did him quite enough justice, because this is the debut of Jericho, which is the Titan that I guess we would all say replaces Terra at the end of the story. But it's basically, Jericho is Deathstroke's son, and he's a pretty major player, I think, in the story.
Mm-hmm. Right, and George does a good job of, obviously his vocal cords were cut, and so he can't speak, but there's such a strong sense of, if not infirmity, just tenderness in the way that he's drawn. His eyes are very expressive. His face is very expressive. He's not overly built, not overly muscular. You can tell that his power is mostly a mental power, and he does care for others, which is a complete opposite from Deathstroke.
And George talks about this. I highly recommend the trade also for the reasons of the forewords, both from Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Part of the main beat of what George talks about is the creation of Jericho, creating this artist mute who cannot speak and has to express himself. And George said, "Marv, you cannot give him word balloons. He's going to be in charge of what he's thinking." So basically, everything George is doing on that page leaps off, because you can really delve into the emotion of Jericho. And that was George Perez who really came up with this character. That Marv had the character's name from the 60s he wanted to use. George Perez brought him to life.
Yeah. And it was very beautifully done.
Yes. Yes, I think George Perez being legendary, what sticks out to my mind, he draws the quintessential cyborg. He obviously created him, but I think Cyborg has at times in recent years been built like a gigantic tank. He's clearly taller than the other Titans. He's built pretty good. His athletic background before the accident that turned him into Cyborg. But George you could see like the shininess kind of leaps off the page, and I think that's a credit to the color team and everybody too. But George also I could picture Cyborg as a living, breathing human being. George just brought that like energy of the character. Yeah. And I think just anybody who's anybody, especially us here, can agree that George just draws the most beautiful woman. And, Starfire alone, obviously, just, modeling, the photographer, Donna Troy. But Donna Troy, obviously, is the Amazonian sister of Wonder Woman. I always just loved how he drew both Donna Troy and Starfire. And just elegant and powerful at the same time. And George just nails both characters. And just everything leaps off the page and just beautifully drawn, just matches everything I think that Marv, had put, to page in the story. George brought it to life.
Yeah.
So, we kind of delved on our favorite characters. Some of our favorite characters is George drew. And we're going to jump right now into the emotional impact of this story, which is a pretty powerful story. And kind of our key moments are OMG standout moments of the story. And we'll take it, straight to Colt first. Like, what stands out to you from this story, Colt?
Oh, gosh, where to begin, right? There's a lot here. Yes. I think some of the big things that stand out for me is, number one, I know it's in the name, the Teen Titans, right? But these are teenagers. Yeah. We're dealing with people, 14, 15, 16 years old, and they're going against mercenaries. Yeah. Their lives are on the line every single day. Yeah. And I don't know if we often think about that. We say, oh, yeah, it's the Teen Titans. But if we put ourselves in their shoes and say, okay, I'm 16, and there's this guy named Deathstroke, and he's trying to kill me.
Deathstroke the Terminator, no less.
Yeah, no kidding. Deathstroke the Terminator. I mean, that's frightening.
Even the older Titans are still, if you put yourself in an 18-year-old shoes or something, like, that's still a lot to digest and a lot to go up against,
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
And you had, you talked about it, the systematic takeout of them. It's basically child abduction, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he's kidnapping. Yeah. Literally.
Yes. We can't get around it. That's
we cannot. Yeah, that is what he's doing. Yeah. Dick Grayson says, gosh, I need to find out where everybody's at. And he goes house to house and room to room and says, uh-oh, none of them are here.
Yeah.
But he's incredulous at the same time. He can't believe that they've been taken because he believes in their power. Yeah. But it's obvious, even a one-eyed mercenary who's world-renowned can take on the Teen Titans. That gives them cause for pause.
The super soldier, Deathstroke can use basically almost maximum potential of his brain. Exactly. So as you see in the story, Deathstroke is basically breaking down their defenses using his brain. If you see in any of the story elements that are in here, Deathstroke systematically takes them out using his intellect. He doesn't even have to go toe to toe. Arguably he would probably could take him down hand to hand, you could say right there, but he basically uses his brain to use less exerted effort to take basically all the Titans out in successive order.
And you talk about how he uses all of his brain, and that's true, except it seems like a lot of the emotional part of it is cut out. Obviously he loved his wife for a time, and then eventually, obviously, when she shoots at him, that would prevent that from continuing. But one of the most emotional parts for me was when Deathstroke is standing by his wife, and the Jackal has his son, and has a knife to his throat, and Deathstroke just stands there, and his wife dearly, dearly wants her son to be let free. And he stands in her way and he says, don't grovel, because that's beneath him. And his word is his bond. And he'll stick with his word, and he'll stick with the contract no matter what. And his son doesn't come into that. And, he tries to save his son, but his vocal cords still get cut. He put his son's life on the line before his word. And that right there just tells you just about everything you need to know about Deathstroke.
It's kind of a frightening reveal, I think, when you're into the mind. And this is happening when Adeline Wilson is talking to Nightwing, basically gaining his confidence, or should say Dick Grayson, before he assumes his Nightwing mantle, describing Deathstroke's origin, which is pretty powerful in depth origin of Deathstroke, how he became a great soldier, subjecting himself to experiments from the military that made him this super soldier, and basically coming out on the side as he's still doing missions for the government, he's also doing these mercenary acts. So what the frightening reveal is when they confront the Jackal, their son is kidnapped, and basically this is a man she doesn't even know. Under the mask, he's a totally different person. You have Slade Wilson, as Colt described. Just you could see, even drawn as a younger man too. You could see, the proud, stoic soldier in him. But when he puts that mask on, he is a totally dangerous, ruthless, cold-hearted individual. And Adeline is like frightened not only for her son's life, but who is this man my husband is while wearing this mask? And it's a powerful scene. Mm-hmm. The entire origin is just highly recommend reading just the Judas Contract alone if you love Deathstroke, because his origin is highly detailed and it really gets you within the character in the story. It stands out tremendously. Mm-hmm. And obviously it's a very Deathstroke-centric story. He's involved in all the facets of the story. Mm-hmm. But another element that stands out is just the relationship he has with Tara, who is, the Judas in the story. And, the 15-year-old, 16-year-old at the start of the story, but he's obviously been planning this for a year. Mm-hmm. This 15-year-old girl that he is either corrupted or, you talk to Deathstroke, he says she found him. But either way, this is a 40-year-old or 40-some-year-old man hanging around with a 15-year-old girl, and Colt, there are, some suggestive things going on there.
Yeah, I think suggestive might be an understatement, too.
Yeah.
Some of the frames are pretty clear that there may have been some intimacy between the two of them. Like you said, we've got a guy in his 40s, mid-40s, and we've got a girl who just turned 16. And, she's there smoking a cigarette. She's in a robe.
Yeah.
He's getting back. Slade Wilson's getting back into his robe.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, gosh, that's pretty suggestive.
Yeah.
Now, we were able, that quote we used earlier from George, he actually speaks to that a little bit.
Yes.
And I'd like to quote him here.
Yes.
To continue, he said, I wanted her to look almost 11, so that when you see her for the first time wearing full makeup and dressed in a provocative outfit where she's just been in bed with Deathstroke, that does jab you a little bit. Like, whoa, good God, this little girl is a slut.
Yeah.
That's heavy language.
Yeah. And for any of the fans, Derek, just the fans at this point are on board with Tara. She's a snarky kind of attitude in there, and they're liking her. And then here they are. Marv is just shoving it down like, no, she's not the person you think she is.
Exactly, and she does appear at least somewhat likable. Maybe she's snarky, maybe she's negative, but there does seem to be something going on between her and Logan Logan definitely thinks that.
Yeah,
and. Then when you see that scene, and when they say heavy makeup, eyeliner, eyeshadow, lipstick, and then
earrings,
the cigarette, it's almost disgusting.
Yeah.
And you see that and you think there's just nothing going on here. She's totally and utterly evil.
You see her in issue 39 in bed with Deathstroke almost, or the aftermath of it. Then in the Judas Contract, they do detail issues 40, 41, where they're battling Brother Blood, and Tara, just as you said, she's a likable character. She's key to them surviving their experience with Brother Blood. She's helping and saving their behinds. She's got this power over the earth, and obviously Brother Blood couldn't, prepare for this power that Tara was displaying. But in issue 39, to go back to that, Deathstroke says he wonders if she's going soft, and this is an element that goes through the trade, and he tests her, and they battle, and he finds out how powerful she is and how dangerous she is, and that scares even Deathstroke, and that would tell you how dangerous she really is. She's not a little girl. This is a dangerous sociopath,
right? For
sure. And Deathstroke may wonder himself what he's got himself into, because he can't control her. That's pretty clear by the story. He cannot control her. Yeah. And these just powerful points through there. Obviously, we have, at the early part of the trade, Robin gives up, Dick Grayson gives up his mantle as Robin, which is pretty memorable. Later on in the story, when his partners and teammates are kidnapped, he has to assume a new identity. This forces him to do that. And he remembers an incident with Superman, back in a story, an adventure he had, and it inspires him to use the name Nightwing. Kid Flash also, this tied into a story we may or may not review in the future, the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Kid Flash departs his identity as Kid Flash, which later he assumes the Flash mantle for a time, and that may have been planned out at this time of him doing that. But Kid Flash goes away, so he's not really a player in the story against Deathstroke, unfortunately, for Kid Flash fans, but that's still pretty powerful. He was been a member of the team for so long. But all these elements lead up basically to the final battle with Terra, which is, seemingly the death of Terra. And that's pretty powerful because this is an all-out slugfest. Mm-hmm. He's got Deathstroke. He's got his son, Jericho, making his debut, and he can control the bodies through eye contact, and you have them battling, Deathstroke and Terra, who's gone off the deep end at this point. So she don't even trust Deathstroke, and you have just such a powerful battle and scene at the end. And what stands out to you from that the annual was the final part of the Judas contract.
Yeah, gosh.
What stood out to you in that final part of the story?
I don't think anybody thought going in that they were going to kill off a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So anytime we see a death, it's already kind of traumatic, and wow, that's pretty heavy. Even more so when it's a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I think, maybe more, now 2016, that's more okay.
Yeah.
But this was back in 1983.
Yeah.
I think it's a little different back then. So to see that kind of writing, and there's a finale, and that comes out later because there's a funeral service, right, that we can talk about too.
Yeah.
But emotionally, what came up for me, I was caught off guard knowing that, wow, they just killed this person off.
Yeah. They created such a huge villain, Derek, but, Marv put that finality to the story.
Right.
And in that final battle, what stood out to you, in that annual, the final part of the Judas contract, if you had to pick a moment from that final battle, and the crap hits the fan, so to speak. They got the Hive there who had kidnapped the Titans.
Right.
Terra has even kidnapped Jericho and Nightwing at this point, and basically has put them in front of Deathstroke, who Deathstroke, sees his son. He didn't even know this, and he sees his son, and he can't believe it, and he wants his son.
Right.
But they won't give him up. Even Terra at this point is turning on him. All this stuff's going on in this annual, this chock full of this finale. What would you say stood out to you?
I think the key thing that stood out to me would be his Deathstroke's concern for his son.
Yeah.
It seems like he has at least some remorse for the way he treated him and time lost. It's been 20 years since he's seen his son.
Yeah.
He didn't check on him in the hospital or anything like that. And then to see his son and to see him with such power, and now he's torn because he doesn't want Jericho to die. He doesn't want him to suffer. He doesn't care about the Teen Titans. I mean, that's fairly obvious.
Yeah.
But Jericho is on their side, so now he has to pick sides. He has to pick sides between his contract, which means everything to him, or he has to pick not to kill his son, which basically means helping the Teen Titans. And of course, Terra just flies into a fury when she sees him battling those emotions inside. And it's interesting to even see Deathstroke with emotions.
Yes.
Because he's such the epitome of the dark, forbidding person who has no emotion, and he just fulfills contracts. He is the ultimate bounty hunter. And to see him struggle with that is so strong. And then Terra just ripping into him and going absolutely crazy.
Ruthless. Just ruthless and heartless.
Tearing up the earth
Yeah.
and all of that comes with it is just remarkable.
And just emotion in this story, before we go to our last station break here, just emotion in the story is just what caught me. Like, Raven, she had those feelings about Terra's betrayal for so long through the story, going back even to when there was always just something. She's an empath, so she kind of knew something was off, but she didn't quite know what it was, but she knew there was something not right about Terra. You got Garfield, who loved Terra, but when those feelings never came out until she was gone, really, just how much he really cared for her. And just the emotional impact for all these characters. Obviously, the story brought Jericho on board, brought Nightwing as a member of the Titan, transformed Robin into Nightwing, just created a whole new emotional element for all these Titans. It's just a powerful story. And when we come back from this last station break, we're going to give our thoughts on the reread value, our final ratings, and we'll give you our tease for the next show. So we want you all to hang on, and we shall be right back. You are listening to thebeststation.net, home of the best station, the best music for the best audience. Now featuring the best podcasts for the best audience.
Baked Cheetos those snacks. Dangerously cheesy.
And we are back with the Comicasters. And we're back reviewing the Judas Contract, New Teen Titans, number 39 and 40, and Tales of the Teen Titans 41 through 44, along with the New Teen Titans Annual, number 3. I don't know if it was Tales of the Teen Titans Annual number 3 at that point, but we're here to give our final reread values. So we're going to start with Colt Hudson here, and you're going to let us know, what do you think? Rereadable?
Certainly rereadable. Gosh, I've read this story a handful of times, and it's worth rereading. I would say it takes less than an hour to get through the whole trade, but it's absolutely worth it. I can say every time, and I can speak for myself, I get entrenched in the story. And that's not always the case when I look at a trade. There's something about this story that stands out. There's a mystery there. There's betrayal. There's hurt. There's a lot going on. I would absolutely reread it, and I would recommend it to many others.
Okay, that's great. Derek Ross, what do you think? Rereadable?
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really enjoyed it, and I've read it over several times. And I think probably my favorite part, which I've read the most, is the Deathstroke background, the backstory there. Oh. It's very well written, and it gives you such a good insight into why he is the way he is, and how he got to be there. So I've read that several times, and I think that alone is good enough for a reread.
I have to agree with you guys. Rereadable, definitely. For me, I would say just, any Deathstroke fan, as I believe we all are sitting here, this is a quintessential story to Deathstroke. If you really want the probably the best Deathstroke story I've ever read, or trade, even just collection of stories, this is what you want to read. It's got his origin, it's got him in his glory, in his full fighting form. He takes out the Teen Titans almost by himself. He used Terra to his advantage. Some would say, well, Terra used him, but just for me, the emotional impact it reads, as an adult, when I read this as not to date myself, but I read this as a teenager myself when it was out, and just totally just stands the test of time. Like, to me, the story is as great as it was when I first read it, and it's just as a powerful story, from the story, the art, and just everything all around. The characters, key players, just characters I love and care for. Just, it has it all, and to me, the reread value. I own the trade myself, and individual issues too, so it shows you how much I love the story. So definite reread value to myself. And we're going to go into the final ratings. So we're just going to we each have our own system of ratings. So Colt's is a number scale, Derek is a letter scale, myself is going to be thumbs, either up or down. So we're going to start with Colt in this round table. And what do you think? What number value if you had to give it for the Judas Contract?
Out of 1 to 10, 1 being deplorable, don't read this, 10 being it's absolutely wonderful, I'm going to put the New Teen Titans, this story, the Judas Contract, 9 out of 10.
Nice. And Derek, you got a letter grade to give it?
Yeah, so obviously F would be, I'm never reading this again. I would highly recommend not buying this as a Christmas present for anyone, including your hated uncle. But I'm going to give it an A. Not an A+. There are some, as much as I love George Perez, there are some scenes that seem a little lazy with the hive cloaks and the rocks that all look the same. But other than that, the story is amazing, the art is amazing, the writing is amazing. Even the lettering, the stress put on certain words to help you through the story is excellent.
Yes, awesome. And I'm going to give it, obviously with a thumbs down, what it is, just a terrible story that I won't ever want to read again. Or a thumbs up, just one of the greatest stories imaginable. I think it's easy to say, it's a thumbs up for me. I just, I love the story. Like I said, it's just, I love the art. George Perez, one of my favorite artists of all time, and just the players involved. Deathstroke, one of my favorite, villains of all time. Nightwing, Cyborg, Wonder Girl, Donna Troy, 3 of my all-time favorite, whether they're Teen Titans or individual stories or not. So definitely, final rating for me is a thumbs up. So as we get into the final stretch here of the show, I just want to tease again. What are your thoughts on the Judas Contract? If you read it, hopefully, or if you will read it, give us your thoughts. At Comicasters on Twitter is our handle. Instagram at Comicasters as well. Tag us in key moments if you got some scans. We're going to post some ourselves, especially when this show is released. And Facebook.com/Comicasters. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear, what did you like about this? What might you not have liked about this story? And if you haven't read it, if you want any more in-depth, discoveries from us, we'll be sure to share them with you. Just message us, and just anything in general. What do you like to see us review in the future? Is there something that you want us? Hey, we want Derek Ross to read. We want Colt Hudson to read. We want MC Brown. Read this. Give us your thoughts. We want to hear them. We want to hear from you. So we're gonna leave it to you guys to give us some suggestions, but we got a big story to read. Colt, why don't you tell us what's coming up?
Yeah, in fact, we are going to look at another mercenary and assassin known as Floyd Lawton, a.k.a. Deadshot. We're going to look at actually his origin story next in Deadshot Beginnings. It's actually collected in a trade. And we're going to look at the man who doesn't miss.
Yes, Batman villain, Deadshot. He's going to be starring Derek in the Suicide Squad movie that will be released later this year, portrayed by Will Smith. But this is a little bit different version. It's the comic version of Deadshot, and it is a powerful story in this, and another one that may not have a happy ending for people. But there are some other stories in Deadshot's past also covered in the trade. But the main gist of this is Deadshot miniseries, volume 1 through 4, and it's a powerful story for all of us that read it. And we can't wait to give you our thoughts and share our opinions on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to wrap this show up. We want to thank you all for listening. Again, at Comicasters where you can reach us. We want to hear from you guys, and we want to thank you all. We had a blast doing this, and we're going to do it again here on our next show. So we want you to hopefully give us some feedback, and stay tuned for our next show because it'll be coming up really soon. So for myself, MC Brown.
For Colt Hudson.
Derek Ross.
This has been the Comicasters. This has been a presentation of The Best Station. The best music for the best audience. TheBestStation.net.